Hi, all. It's Jan of the Jan Files. I hope you will follow my YouTube channel. If you haven't done so, subscribe and then hit that little notify button so it'll pop up when I post a new one. Today, I'm just going to give you a little kind of mini bio about who I am and how I got here. So, I was born, I'm not going to give you the year, but I'm going to make you figure it out. I was born in Connecticut. My parents were Democrats. My parents were liberals. My parents, prior to becoming parents, were very politically involved. And it was a kind of thing where I grew up talking about politics at the dinner table. Um, my father used to talk about Tricky Dick. Those of you who are old enough to know who that is, right? If not, the rest of you do your homework. And so that's how I, experienced the world at a very young age. When I was in third grade, that's a clue to how old I am. I um, was watching TV on a Thursday night upstairs in my parents' bedroom, and Bewitched was on, which was my favorite show. And I was watching, and all of a sudden, it they broke into the show. They said, "Oh, breaking news," which, of course, at that age I hadn't really seen, except for once when I was little, very, very, very little, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. So I saw this and I said, um, wow, what happened? And this guy by the name of Martin Luther King was shot. And I went down to tell my parents. My dad started to cry. My mom was really upset. And it was pretty much, if I look back, that's probably what threaded the needle for me, was who was this man that my parents were so profoundly upset about his being shot and obviously being assassinated. And so from that moment that was a very formational moment for me. And so I think a year later, I have a sister who's 6 years older than me. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than I am. But my sister and I went to a candlelight vigil, and I believe it was a year later after he had been assassinated on the New Haven Green. And that was probably my first march of any kind. And I just remember feeling that it was really important to be there. I was very young still. But so this was elementary school for me. So also what else happened in elementary school was the big Cassius Clay, Joe Frazier fights. Okay. Now I'm using the name that I knew him as, and he was a conscientious objector. And because I just had two choices to figure out who I was going to support, because I didn't care about boxing at that age, but it was a big deal. And so, you choose somebody. And I chose, of course, the conscientious objector because I had no reason not to. And I had every reason to stand with somebody who was speaking out against the Vietnam War. And so I chose Cassius Clay, which I'm sure most of you know became Muhammad Ali. Then probably the next thing that happened was Kent State. And Kent State, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, was an awful, awful shooting by the National Guard of college students at Kent State in Ohio. And there's a famous picture, if you've ever seen it, if you know anything about it, of a young woman on the ground looking up, screaming because she was next to a boy, and a college year boy still, who had been murdered. And I wore a black armband to school the next day. Sometimes I think back about what I did when I was really younger, and I was like, wow, you were really out there. But I didn't. I did it, and I didn't care what kids thought of me when I did these kinds of things. And that pretty much has stayed with me my entire life. I have, I went on to college, and I was still pretty politically aware at that time. And I remember when I registered to vote, because to me also that was a really, really big deal. It was like I was so excited that I was going to get to vote. I remember going to the town hall and remember signing up so that I could vote. And my kids have had that same experience because they understand how important it is to vote. I have two daughters, teenagers, both one's in college, the other one's going into college. And so what I have made sure as a parent is that they understand the world around them. And there's a really important reason why, especially for them. My husband and my daughters are Black. And so I have been very, very aware that their experience of the world is different than mine. I'm going to take you back to my college years for a second. I remember I was a resident advisor, and then I became a head resident. And when we had training in college when you did these things, and one time this Black professor, it was so many years ago, folks, I have no idea what his name was. Now, here I am, liberal me, sitting in the thing, excited to hear what this guy was going to talk about. And basically, he looked at the audience. He said, if you're white, you're racist. And I went, no. What? I'm not racist. How could I be racist? I'm very aware, But by the end of that experience with him and that seminar, I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it. And I understood. He didn't use the word privilege at that point, but it's what he was talking about. He was talking about by the mere fact of being white, you have a privilege in this country that exists. Whether you want it, whether you don't want it, you have it because you are not subjected to the institutional racism that Black people are. I got it. And so, did I get it entirely? No, absolutely not. I got it on one level intellectually. It took me years and to really begin to explore what that really truly meant. And certainly, the way I've lived my life, I have always had a lot of people of color, Black people, people of color, gay people, all kinds of people, diverse people around me. I eventually, after college, moved to New York City, pursuing acting and directing. And like most, I ended up running I ended up running restaurants. I would always start out as a bartender or a waiter, and then I would move on and end up managing restaurants. So eventually I went into producing and worked for Morgan Freeman's company, and then decided that I didn't want to do because I was living bi-coastally. This is decades going by now, folks. So I'm just kind of giving you the overview of all of this stuff. And ended up coming back to New York. Did a lot of different things here. I had a really toxic relationship. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So I'm a victim of domestic violence. I'm a survivor. Let me put it that way. I am a survivor of domestic violence. And I lived through it for a long time. And for a long time, I was deeply ashamed. So I truly understand on some level what women who are abused go through. And I'm not going to get into the gory details of it, but I was lucky enough to get out of that relationship. And like I said, it was a long one, and find, thankfully, the love of my life. And, we decided to get married and, have kids, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how, the overview of my adult life is. But in terms of who I am, like the core part of me is that when my husband and I decided to move out of the city because the school systems at that point were like sucked. We got into a special program, my kids, but that was a disaster. So we ended up moving, and then I moved to the town that I live in now, which I've talked about a lot because when we moved here, I stupidly didn't check to see whether it was like a Democratic area or a Republican area. I was really just focused on, I did look at the racial makeup of the schools and of the town. But, I had to stay close to the city. Well, we had a lot of factors when we moved. So anyway, I moved into this very, very Republican town. And all the stuff that I have been through, on all kinds of levels, really came home here. Because there was a period of time earlier when I was in that other relationship, I wasn't really all that politically aware as I had used to be. And so, but when I came here, it was like I was firing on all cylinders, mostly because I had children. And I knew that their experience as young Black girls was going to be far different than my experience growing up. And that I had to do the work of becoming a true anti-racist, the work that I still do, to really be able to help them and do my part to make the world a better place for them. And along, obviously, with my husband. So in that process, I have just become a warrior. I don't know how else to put it. I stand up, I stand out, I've spoken at board meetings, I've had people tell me I'm ruining this town, I have had people telling me I'm nuts, literally, like I'm mentally ill, which I don't fucking like when people do that. It's not because I question my mental sanity, although I do that anyway. But it's because that's a horrific thing to say. They say it as a thing to wound people. And mental illness is such that nobody should be making fun of mental illness. Now, let's go to Trump for half a second, because what he has is not, I don't believe mental illness. I think that he is just kind of collapsing. And maybe it is mental illness. But the reality is, at this stage of the game, he needs to be removed. So, whatever. I'm not going to go through that right now. I just kind of want to give you my overview of where I am, where I live, and how I have behaved here. I have been threatened. I have had people knocking on my door. I've had people stealing things from my front lawn. I mean, but people always say to me, Jan, why don't you tone it down and stop calling everybody a racist? First of all, I don't call everybody a fucking racist. Most people are racist, but I don't call everybody a racist. And, you can look at being racism, and it's kind of how I look at it, as being in a powerful place. In other words, you can't be racist if you don't have power. In other words, you can be bigoted, you can, say stupid, ugly things, but in terms of really having the power to affect anybody else's life, that really profoundly lies with white people, because we have made sure that all of our institutions are racist. And I profoundly believe that. I think we're seeing how deeply insidious racism is in this country, as well as misogyny. Um, and, you know, it's like everything that might have been buried at one point or another is just seeping, bubbling to the top like a cauldron of shit. It just all just rises up there. And now we can all see the white supremacy, the white supremacists, the religious people who supposedly are, you know, Christian bullshit that have no use for people that aren't white. And so this is all that frames me, right? So people, I am going to go next week at some point to stand in front of MoMA with my camera. I got a microphone, I got the whole works, to ask people questions because of what I posted about the other day about two of the board trustees being in the Epstein files, being accused of raping girls. And so I'm going to do that. But people have said to me, aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? You know, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Maybe that's stupid. I mean, I'm cautious. I'm not intending to do anything illegal. But I understand at some point I might get arrested. Okay. But I don't have a choice. You see, that's how I perceive this. I don't have a choice but to do this. And it is every cell in my being that is saying, you cannot stand down. You have to stand up. And if it means maybe at some point putting myself in harm's way for my family, you bet your ass I'm going to do it. And I'm also not going to take shit from people who are racist, misogynist assholes, which unfortunately, there are a lot of people where I live that are like that. I also have some fabulous neighbors and people around me who have been there, come to marches with me, started marches. I've done all of that. I've held candlelight vigils for Heather Heyer in Charlottesville. I have done that. I had I organized a Black Lives Matter march in June of 2020. That was the largest thing I think this town has ever seen. And I'm particularly proud of that. So that's just kind of how I got here. Now I feel like I need to be bigger. Now I need to reach more people. Now I have to be out there more because the times demand it of me. Because I can't sit back and be afraid. I can't sit back and be silent. I can't sit back and allow others to determine the future of the United States. I at one point was thinking, we should just pack up and leave because I was fearful for my kids and my husband, not so much myself, but them and about what would happen when Trump became president. My kids kind of laugh at it now because more than once I've told them we're going to pack up and leave. So they've gotten to the point like, yeah, Mom, we know. But anyway, that's who I am. And this is an overview. I intend to keep doing this. I still, the biggest thing I've been thinking about today, just as kind of an aside, how did it get to the point where the GOP cares so little for Americans? I'm not going to give you the answer. I don't have the answer. I mean, we could all cite Donald Trump, but I don't think it's just Donald Trump at all. Okay? I think that racism, misogyny, religion has played a big fucking role in how we got here. Christianity, for the most part. The problem isn't people who are Muslim, okay? The problem isn't people in my mind who are Jewish. The problem is, in my mind, are far more Christians who claim to be something that they're not. So Anyway, folks, that's a little bit about me. I will be back. I mean, this is today's. I will be filming in the next couple days too about specific points. I want to talk about Supreme Court. There's a lot of things I want to get into with you. I do hope that you will continue to follow me, share the YouTube videos, ask others to support me. As at this point, it's just me, myself, and I would like at some point to be able to bring somebody else on to help. But right now, it's just me. So just a little bit about who I am, and take care and have a wonderful weekend. And please, please stay safe. Thanks.